Is Steve Kerr right?
Of course he's right. And I'm broadly sympathetic to those who, even when they watch this show, say, look, I watch sports to escape this kind of stuff, the real world. I want distraction. I get that. The old saying is a sports show should be like a bar. You know, you don't go in and talk religion or politics because it can be divisive. I am sympathetic to that. But these are strange and dangerous times. And it's more important than ever that citizens get informed and follow their consciences. And if you look at the history of sports, Hank Greenberg, Detroit superstar, Detroit Tigers slugging superstar, enlists publicly in the Army after Pearl Harbor. You could say, well, that's patriotic. Sure, but political activism and awareness is patriotic. Lou Alcindor, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Jim Brown joined, others to support Muhammad Ali at a time where his political awareness and activism was very important in the civil rights movement and beyond. This is nothing new in our sporting landscape. And so I applaud Steve Kerr for this. He's absolutely right. Get informed, follow your conscience. He's leading by example, particularly in a world and in a culture, American culture. What we export more than anything is our culture around the world still. And particularly in America, our sports culture, the figures there are disproportionately famous and influential. And if they are so moved, especially nowadays, they should use it. I applaud Steve Kerr, Greg Popovich, and others.
Well, first of all, I agree with you, and I appreciate your latter points about what our culture is all about and what we export, because that's absolutely true. Steve Kerr is a good man. Steve Kerr is not just an outstanding coach. He's not just a champion as a player, but he's somebody, regardless of the fact that I didn't believe that Mark Jackson should have ever lost his job. I certainly have no problem with Steve Kerr being the one that benefited from it, because he deserves it. And he's done an outstanding job and has established himself as one of the premier coaches in basketball, and he deserves credit. But also he deserves credit because he's a genuinely decent man, a decent human being who's not a fake. He isn't somebody that's just speaking about it because he's trying to join the chorus or anything like that. He's always been an intellectual to some degree. He's always been conscientious. We all know him to be that, and we also know the story about how his dad, who was an ambassador, ultimately was murdered by terrorists. So we know his story, and obviously it hits him in ways that it doesn't hit most of us, because it directly affected him for the rest of his life. Just to walk around on a day-to-day basis, no matter how wonderful your life is, knowing that on Father's Day, for example, or any other day of the year, you don't have your father around because a terrorist murdered him, is something that's incredibly profound. So I take his words very, very serious. I have no problem with what he said. He's absolutely right, and we should applaud his position. The only thing that I would say, however, is that while we're sitting here and doing that as it pertains to Steve Kerr, I'll piggyback off of what you ultimately ended the conversation with on your part, Max, and that is this. If you're going to speak about something, have the decency to attempt to educate yourself on the issues, rather than just trying to wax poetically about something you don't know anything about at all. Don't do that, because now you veered the conversation in a different direction and have positioned yourself where you can get attacked. And let me take myself, for example, Max. One of the things that people don't appreciate about me, particularly in the African-American community, I get a lot of love, don't get me wrong, and my brothers and sisters love me, and I love them back. But one of the things that goes widely unrecognized about me is that even though I speak on an abundance of issues, I don't pretend to know everything. I know what I don't know, and I'm willing to acknowledge it. But what I will do is touch on it to be a provocateur of thought, so somebody else can take off that softball that I lobbed up in the air and knock it out the park with their level of intelligence, their information, et cetera, et cetera. Sometimes it takes somebody being in the forefront, willing to give a spark plug to the conversation so dialogue can disseminate to the masses and other more informed and intelligent voices can take it to another level. You're not always the finished product just because you're touching on something. Sometimes we might touch on things intimately and with depth, And then other times we might touch on it on a surface level just to engage folks in conversation so they can take it to another level, thereby forcing us all to have a conversation that needs to be had. And I think that's the kind of thing that Steve Kerr is alluding to. I applaud him for it. I happen to talk to owner Joe Lacob on occasion for the Golden State Warriors whenever I see him. Bob Myers, the general manager. Golden State Warriors are a first-class organization. They don't all think alike. They have very different beliefs, but they come together for a common goal, and they respect each other's point of view. And that dialogue is what makes them a first-class organization, because they're able to take all things into account. And that makes them that much more formidable because they think about everything. And it ain't just on the court. It's beyond. And that's why Steve Kerr should be commended for this, because he's an extension of a culture that we should all be proud of that's taking place in the Golden State.
And my point that you talked about citizens being informed is important. We both supported Colin Kaepernick months ago until he said there was no difference in candidates. He's not going to vote. And he showed up with a Castro T-shirt. And that's when you say time out. Got to be better informed than that. And if you think you are informed and those are the conclusions you reach, those conclusions will be criticized. And the fact that when Steve Kerr and Greg Popovich, for that matter, because he immediately jumps to mind, when they speak about these things, they appear to be informed and have reached rational conclusions. Not that I agree with them, but that they are well-informed conclusions is important. Particularly nowadays, ignorance is not an excuse. People need to get informed.